Turns out the whistleblower had plenty of company in his concern about Donald Trump asking the leader of Ukraine to dig up dirt on the Bidens from none other the conservative fixture and former national security advisor for Donald Trump, John Bolton. According to the testimony from one of Bolton's deputies, Fiona Hill, a Russia hawk who worked for Donald Trump until this summer, Bolton claimed, quote, "I'm not part of whatever drug deal Sondland and Mulvaney are cooking up." Mulvaney refers to Mick Mulvaney, Donald Trump's acting chief of staff, and Sondland, of course, Donald Trump's ambassador to the EU, who's in the middle of Trump's pressure campaign against the Ukrainian leader. A source tells me today that Sondland was, quote, trying to deliver Hunter Biden to Trump in hopes of being considered as a Secretary of State candidate in a second Trump term. Fiona Hill, in more than 10 hours of testimony yesterday, testified that Bolton described Rudy Giuliani as a, quote, hand grenade who's going to blow everybody up. According to a source close to Hill, she expressed flashes of anger during her testimony at the spread of conspiracy theories and told House investigators that the only person who benefits from those efforts is Vladimir Putin. Hill is also said by this source to have testified that there was, quote, absolutely a quid pro quo for the meeting with Trump, meaning that Zelensky was expected to open investigations that would damage the Bidens before a meeting with Trump would be scheduled. The New York Times reports on Hill's depiction of a deep and acrimonious divide that emerged at the highest levels of the policymaking process, describing a rather unholy alliance between Giuliani, Sondland, and Mulvaney, and John Bolton and his allies pushing back. From that Times report, quote, Mr. Bolton got into a tense exchange on July 10th with Sondland, the Trump donor turned ambassador to the EU, who was working with Giuliani to press Ukraine to investigate Democrats. Hill testified that Mr. Bolton told her to notify the chief lawyer for the National Security Council about a rogue effort by Mr. Sondland, Mr. Giuliani, and Mick Mulvaney, the acting White House chief of staff. Ms. Hill testified that Mr. Giuliani and his allies circumvented the usual national security process to run their own foreign policy efforts, leaving the president's official advisors aware of the rogue operation but powerless to stop it. Hill also implicated the president in this surreal bit of testimony, also reported by the New York Times. She reportedly described confronting Sondland about the Ukraine operation, and when she asked him who put him in charge of Ukraine, Sondland replied, quote, the president. Hill was the first White House advisor to testify in the impeachment inquiry, and a source close to her testimony told me that the tense back and forth with the White House counsel's office in advance of her appearance yesterday was an effort to clear the way for more White House advisors to cooperate with the congressional probe. And that is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. With us from the Washington Post, White House reporter Ashley Parker, Associate Editor for Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stoddard, NBC and MSNBC National Affairs Analyst John Heilman, also co-host of The Circus. At the table, Jason Johnson, Politics Editor for The Root, and former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. I've wanted to talk to all of you since this news broke, but I have to start with you, Claire. Matt Miller, a friend of the show, had some sort of sharp words about, I think the spirit of it was when John Bolton emerges as the White Knight. It says a lot about the villains in the story.
Yeah, I look back with nostalgia at a time when we thought of John Bolton as kind of a bad guy. As it turns out, he has some character in there. And even though I may disagree with him on some policy, I think he may emerge from this as a key figure. If they get him in front of this committee with a subpoena and he is honest with the committee, I think the full breadth and depth of the malfeasance that was going on as it related to using the presidency for politics is going to become very, very clear.
A.B. Stoddard, I've also been dying to talk to you, and I want you. I was pointed to the legal breakthrough, which is really overshadowed by the dramatic color that Fiona Hill brought to life in her testimony yesterday about John Bolton trying to stand up to really, talk about three stooges, which is, I think, what Donald Trump refers to the three primary opponents in the GOP. I mean, the three stooges are clearly Rudy, Sondland, and Mulvaney. But it was pointed out to me by someone familiar with clearing the way for Hill's testimony that it's not insignificant that this marker was laid down about the limitations legally of executive privilege. This is a letter from Hill's attorney. Quote, executive privilege likely does not apply to information which is no longer confidential and has come within the sphere of public knowledge through broad disclosures. Matters which have been made public through affirmative actions of the White House, I'm guessing he means that transcript, and or media reports are likely not protected as confidential by executive privilege because they are, by their very nature, no longer confidential. We understand that deliberative process privilege disappears altogether when there's any reason to believe, and I lost the rest of it, but the point there being that once the White House released the transcript and people are name checked and Donald Trump put his own once private phone call out into the public sphere, the policymakers are free to testify.
Absolutely. And although Donald Trump continues to tell everyone in his Twitter feed that the whistleblower has misrepresented his conversation, we all learned about the conversation by reading the transcript his White House released. And that has led to an impeachment investigation because he solicited the help of a foreign country in interfering in next year's election and asking them to investigate his political rival. It's interesting that the end of your sentence from the lawyer or paragraph from the lawyer is about when there's reason to believe that there might have been misconduct in the government. So set aside what the White House has made public, and they've made a lot public. The lawyers have confirmed that politically sensitive and potentially illegal or highly dangerous conversations the president had with world leaders were put on a separate server saved for military secrets and covert operations. The lawyer for Fiona Hill was making the case that executive privilege is that the White House tried to impose upon her testimony is not a shield for corrupt activities. And the lawyer made clear that when there is a belief, a suspicion that there is government misconduct, that the executive privilege no longer applies. And that was what she was coming to tell the committee, and she did so under subpoena.
John Heilman, Rudy Giuliani is a hand grenade. So testified Fiona Hill yesterday. Seems like a moment.
Yes, I mean, look, I think, Nicole, you talked about some of the legal implications of what we learned yesterday that kind of have gotten obscured by this extraordinary back and forth between Rudy Giuliani and John Bolton, the notions of like a lot of high explosives being thrown around here, hand grenades, atomic bombs, all kinds of stuff, and the drama and melodrama of all of that. I'm not sure I'd like to be compared to either one of those things, maybe more of a neutron bomb, the kind of thing, blows things up and leaves the buildings intact. But, what I noticed, what I thought was important yesterday, the most important things as we go forward were two things, one of which related to the appearance of Mick Mulvaney in the picture. We had previously talked about the three previous stooges who had the high stooges at the high table of Rudy Giuliani, Bill Barr, and Mike Pompeo. We now have Mick Mulvaney drawn into this. So currently, people who should be subpoenaed, and I would guess almost certainly will be subpoenaed, are the Secretary of State, John Bolton, the top national security advisor at the time, the White House Chief of Staff, arguably the second most powerful person in the United States of America, and then, of course, Donald Trump's sort of criminal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who's sort of a criminal lawyer without the lawyer part. All of them, I think, now being kind of pushed in the middle of this. And then secondly, the notion that amid all of the name calling and the concern that John Bolton expressed, according to Hill, the notion that he expressed that concern in the form of saying, we must go now and speak to a lawyer. We have to go now to the head lawyer at the National Security Council. We need someone in the White House counsel's office involved in this, which suggests that Bolton was not merely alarmed, upset, outraged by what he saw unfolding in front of him, but that he had at least suggests that he might have been thinking or was thinking that the President of the United States and his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, were possibly engaged in a criminal conspiracy. And I think that is enormously significant in no small part because it means there's a record. Right. And the record of that outreach to the council will exist and can also be subpoenaed. And so if you think about the various days in this scandal that have happened over the course of the last 3.5 weeks, I think in terms of where this investigation is going now, directionally, and how wide the net now is, how significant the people caught in that net are, and what the picture we're now getting of how bad this is for Donald Trump. Yesterday was a big, big deal. I won't say the word that Joe Biden would say, but you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying. Ashley Parker, let me ask you to pick up on I think what John Heilemann laid out in terms of just hitting pause on what we now understand to be the size and scope of the alarm. John Bolton, Donald Trump's national security advisor, sent his deputy Fiona Hill not just to the counsel's office, not just to the chief of staff's office, which is when you go when you think you might be in trouble, but to the person in the counsel's office in charge of national security. That's like really big, holy bleep kind of trouble. That's a big, I worked in the White House for 6 years, never went to that guy. What does it say that John Bolton thought there were legal implications for the plays being run not over in Ukraine, not out of the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, not out of the ambassador's residence, but in your paper, there are references to the Ward Room. We should explain what that is. It's a private dining room right underneath the Oval Office. If you take a broom and poke it, I think you hit the Oval Office. Gordon Sondland was running this off-the-books dark op that so alarmed John Bolton out of the Ward Room of the West Wing.
Well, that's exactly right. I think what you're seeing here, and John got at this, is there were any number of people inside the White House who were deeply alarmed and upset by what was going on. And unlike some iterations of people in the White House who were alarmed and upset, these people, a lot of them, when we see the testimony coming out, they took action. They tried to put in the guardrails and the safeguards, and they had the confrontations, and they made their opinions known. So there was bad behavior. There were people flagging this bad behavior. And that sort of brings me to another point, which is one of the reasons why the House Democrats seem to have hit a certain amount of momentum, which is something they have long struggled with, is if you sort of read between the lines here, there's actually a lot of willing witnesses who are eager to go up and testify. And so as soon as they get that subpoena that gives them cover to kind of defy what the White House is saying, unlike in the Mueller investigation and some other things that we in the media and investigators have been trying to get to the bottom of, you have people who basically their attitude is, what I saw alarmed me and bothered me. I sounded the alarms inside the White House, inside the West Wing. I sounded the alarms to the highest level, and now I am more than happy to go sound the alarms to these congressional committees and tell everything I know. So not every witness, but there's a number of very willing people who saw a lot and are more than happy to share.
And what's so amazing, Jason, is that not one witness, not Fiona Hill, not the accounts of John Bolton, not Kurt Volker, no one puts Donald Trump on the side of ethics. No one puts Donald Trump on the side of anyone other than Rudy Giuliani, running a shadow foreign policy outside of the State Department, running investigations outside of the FBI, gathering intel on foreign leaders outside of the CIA. Let me read you this just because it's going to end up in the history books of yesterday. I think, as John said, I agree with him. It was a huge day. At one point, Fiona Hill confronted Sondland, who had inserted himself in dealings with Ukraine, even though it was not part of his official portfolio, according to people informed about Hill's testimony. He told her he was in charge of Ukraine, a moment she compared to Secretary of State Alan Haig Jr.'s declaration that he was in charge after Ronald Reagan's assassination attempt, according to those who heard the testimony. So not only were these people empowered by the president and Rudy Giuliani, they were a little bat bleep crazy.
Oh, yeah, they were all running around. And what this really speaks to, Nicole, is the fact that the power, Trump runs this White House and by extension Washington like some sort of feudal lord. I mean, he tells Sondland, bring me the head of Joe Biden and then I'll give you this position. Rudy Giuliani, cut this deal, cut that deal. There is a level of disorganization and irresponsibility that is offensive to people who get into these positions because they care about keeping our country safe. And what I think has been positive about some of this is not just that the president hasn't been able to chase out every single ethical person in Washington, but that we still have enough functional individuals. We still have enough people who believe in country over this administration enough to say, hey, maybe we should do something about this. And I'm with Claire. Look, there's little or nothing John Bolton has ever done that I would agree with. But the fact that he said we should not have a secret cabal of people.
A drug deal.
A drug deal. I mean, literally, it's from the movies. Like, the calls are coming from the White House, right? The fact that he said this is where this has to stop is a good sign that some people still care about this country.
A.B. Stoddard, I want you to watch this tape of Donald Trump explaining why John Bolton left.
I told him, John, You have too many people, you're not getting along with people, and a lot of us, including me, disagree with some of your tactics and some of your ideas. And I wish you well, but I'd like you to submit your resignation, and he did that. And I know he's going to do well. I hope he's going to do well, and I wish him well.
So that wasn't date stamped, but I believed it was somewhere around September 10th. It was right after September 11th. It was right after the calamity, like 11 calamities ago, of Donald Trump wanting to hunker down with the Taliban at Camp David, which seemed unbelievable. And we all projected onto that statement that that was about people that disagreed with John over bringing the Taliban to Camp David. But is it possible? I mean, I'm just reading this reporting. It's possible that the people he didn't get along with were Sondland, who will have his day on Capitol Hill Thursday, who said that the president empowered him on Ukraine, Mulvaney, who's intimately involved in putting the hold on the military aid, and Rudy, who was running a shadow foreign policy. It looks like the people that John Bolton might not have gotten along with were the ones running this off-the-books op for the president.
That's right. What's interesting is long before John Bolton left the White House, he had been marginalized and isolated. And when the president took his theatrical step into the demilitarized zone with Kim Jong-un, the national security advisor, John Bolton, had been marooned in Mongolia and was not a part of anything of consequence, because the president knew how he felt about the president's whims or changing policies on North Korea, Iran, a whole bunch of hotbeds. It really was clear that Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, and he was pretty proud of it, was had created his own national security council within the White House. And they had sidelined Bolton, and that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had not spoken to Bolton in a long time and was also freezing him out. And so what we did not know was that Bolton was probably making life very complicated for these other people that we were not, at the time aware were running sort of a de facto separate it's the State Department and National Security operation, and that's Gordon Sondland, who is the EU ambassador. Had no business running a Ukraine operation, as you say, a Black Ops Ukraine operation with Rudy Giuliani. And so Bolton knows way too much. Even if he wasn't a part of things, he had people there. He knew everything that was going on. I have no idea if Mick Mulvaney and these other people got wind of the fact that he and Fiona Hill were horrified and went to the NSC Council on this. But certainly they had policy disagreements. Bolton was being shut out. And it might have been, obviously, it risen to the top with Trump that he was not facilitating the capers that Sondland and Rudy Giuliani were on at the behest of the president.
So, Claire, the White House counsel's person designated for national security was really busy with this Ukraine call because the CIA general counsel came over and talked to that person, too.
Yeah, and by the way, a couple of these lawyers made referrals to DOJ.
Right.
Criminal division.
What happened to those?
They went away. But, I got to cure everyone. I don't need to say I adore you, but I think we have to quit calling this a shadow foreign policy op.
Right, this was no foreign policy.
This was no foreign policy.
Right.
This was a political op.
A shakedown.
And the idea that Rudy Giuliani is working pro bono to try to reelect the president by taking, frankly, illegal steps to engage a foreign government in an American election, which is illegal on its face, and then further is trying to help him win election and is doing it pro bono, which is against the law. You can't give pro bono to a campaign. And this Sondland guy, what is the deal with him? You know what he was? He was a hotel developer.
Right.
This isn't a foreign policy guy. This is a guy who Trump probably liked because they talked about hotels and he wanted to be rich and he wanted to be in the circle. What is he doing saying he's in charge? I mean, who is letting these people run wild? Well, we know who it is. It's the guy who's in charge who thinks it's okay to have Rudy Giuliani and some hotel developer out there trying to engage a foreign government in trying to impact his political opponent in next year's election.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.